Chase again, and a little bit of different video this time. Kind of got inspired to make this video because I am taking philosophy right now in school, and I think one of the questions posed was, see if I can bring it up, if I can find it real quick here. Go back into my school here, classes. It just got me thinking about, here it is. There's a couple different questions. I think you can read either of them and kind of go into what I wanted to talk about. One of them is, according to Buddhism, the self is an illusion and a source of suffering. According to the existentialist philosopher Sartre, the self is always incomplete and a work in progress. What theories of selfhood do you find the most interesting or compelling? And then another question was, when defining human nature and selfhood, we often include free will. Is human behavior determined by prior events, social and material, or is human behavior entirely free? I think I answered kind of a combination of those two questions was my answer, or maybe I kind of got off topic because I kind of blended the two answers. But part of me, the way I answered, and part of what I believe is that I don't know how you can personally believe that a day-to-day, whatever happens in a day, can be predetermined or preordained, or we were always going to go, we were always going to eat, cereal for breakfast, or we were always going to take that, direction or that route to work. We were always going to take that trip to New York, or we were always going to take that vacation to that certain destination. Things are planned. Like, you plan things, but obviously most of the time those plans don't stay the same, or something changes. And I think that just those small occurrences are examples of nothing being predetermined. People like to argue that free will doesn't exist, that you were always going to do the same thing. Human behavior is a repetitive cycle of the same the same event or the same choices. You're always going to make those certain choices. I fail to see how that's true. I maybe there's some circumstances of that. A drug addict is an example they use. I would say the drug addict is an example of how things aren't predetermined. If a drug addict made the same choices, he would be a drug addict. He or she would be a drug addict for life, a heroin addict for life, or a meth addict for life. How do they get clean? How are the ones that get clean? How is that an example of something being predetermined? Was it always predetermined that they were going to get addicted, and then they were going to get clean eventually? That doesn't make any sense. I feel like that's, if you want to use that example of something that you said, that you would say that there isn't free will, I would counter with that. That's an example of it not being, of there being free will, of you being able to choose and change the direction of your life and your circumstances. How does an overweight person become slim? By changing their diet, changing the way that they eat. That's a choice. That's free will. If they didn't have free will, they would be fat their whole life, or they'd be overweight or out of shape. These are just small, occurrences and small examples, but I think it feeds to the bigger discussion of there being, the bigger answer of there being free will. So I would love to hear others' opinions about this and examples of either or for and against. And I think the part of my answer was those examples. The drug addict example, and overweight and skinny, and changing your lifestyle. And how does a cigarette smoker quit smoking? If if his choices or her choices were always going to be the same, or if free will doesn't exist, wouldn't they always be addicted to smoking? Wouldn't they smoke until they died, or until they possibly had developed lung cancer, or emphysema, or any other kind of disease or cancer? Wouldn't they just keep smoking? I mean, I think that's an example of choice. There's, and maybe somebody could point out if I'm attributing choice to free will. Are they one and the same, or are they different? Are they interchangeable? Am I using those two ideas interchangeably? Maybe I'm doing that. Maybe if there's another element or another way to describe free will, then maybe I'm using those interchangeably too much. So I would welcome any feedback on that idea. The other portion of the one question was that behavioral events, like I could see, and I think this is a bigger question that involves class warfare and growing up in poverty, and maybe even racial tensions and problems that we have because of the opportunities that are afforded to certain people of skin color. If you're, it's just a fact. If you're white in this country, you have a better chance at becoming somebody who either goes to college or gets a higher education or gets a better job. That those of color, whether it be African American or Hispanic, the opportunities aren't there as much, and you grow up in a lot of instances in poor neighborhoods, and the opportunities aren't as plentiful what I was trying to say, I guess I could say it this way: it's tempting, the temptations to just forget about school, or forget about getting that better job, to deal drugs in some instances, and to pursue that kind of life is more tempting when you're in poverty, than to go to school and work, and you see others making sometimes they make a lot of money doing that, and you see that lifestyle, and they take their chances with it, instead of having the education and having those ideas instilled from day one, from a stable stable family with two parents in the household who support the children, and take part in their children's lives, and their extracurricular activities in school, and take part in their school, what they do at school, and their education. So that feeds into a whole other discussion, but I understand what they're trying to say with how behavioral influences free will. Sometimes you are grown up in a situation where the choice isn't as easy, but I still think the choice is there. There are opportunities, and it makes it, and I understand how difficult it is to get caught up in lifestyles like that when everybody else around you is doing it, when the environment around you breeds that and inhibits you from making those choices. But there's always that opportunity to be above that. I know that schools always should be an environment for those who are seeking refuge from those kinds of choices, that to show these kids in their younger ages that there's a better way to live life, there's better opportunities than to deal drugs or get into those kinds of activities, at a younger age. Some of these kids get into that when they're in their, still, when they're not even in the middle school and in early middle school. Middle school sometimes feels like it's worse than high school at certain points, especially in my experience, and I know I've heard from others. Middle school is where it almost feels like the most critical point in somebody's life is middle school, because it's a time where obviously you hit puberty, and you start changing, you start becoming a child into a young adult, and it's such a critical time in somebody's life, that's where I think if we wanted to improve our education system across this country, it'd be improving middle schools, and then that would just build. That would help. We wouldn't have to even change or even try to change high schools. By changing middle schools, by helping kids earlier on, that's already instilled in them. So going forward, it makes the process that much easier. So these kids have the right ideas in their head that, hey, I want to go to college, I want to go to the military, or I want to be this. I want to go to vocational school. I want to be an electrician or a plumber, or I have these ideas in my head for my life, instead of getting out of middle school or dropping out of high school early, or getting out of high school after, or graduating from high school and then not knowing what to do after that. So we want to cut down on that. But I could see how being in an environment where the choices are so difficult and so easy to make the wrong choice, how that doesn't feel like free will. But I still feel like free will is still there, even in its smallest form, even in like the darkest of places. Choices could still be made that would give you, to me, would still be free will. The environment might not be cohesive for it, but it still exists despite that. So I think that was part of one of the questions. So I would love for anybody to give feedback, and maybe we can continue the discussion, make another video, and keep talking about this, because I think it's very interesting, and I think philosophy and philosophical questions are so important. I think going forward, philosophy is going to play a bigger role in how we approach some of the problems that we have, because it touches on a lot of the issues that currently, still that this country has problems with, or countries around the world still have problems with. And if we could answer the philosophical questions, that could help us answer the questions that we face in our daily life. So, like I said, feel free to comment, respond, and maybe we can start a great discussion. Thank you, guys.